Hey everyone, my name is Mr. Duel. Welcome back to another Genshin Impact video. In this video, I will be expressing my thoughts so far on Constellation Zero Childe. It's been roughly 3 weeks since I obtained him, and we'll be going over his DPS build. I'll be doing different builds for him in the future, and we'll express my thoughts about them in later videos. Childe is a unique character in Genshin Impact at the making of this video because he is the first character to be able to change stances from range to melee. His primary weapon is a bow, but in using his elemental skill, Foul Legacy Raging Tide, he switches into melee stance in which he holds dual daggers made of Hydro. While in Raging Tide, the damage output will only be Hydro damage, and will still be considered normal attack damage, just like wielding his bow. His elemental burst, Havoc Obliteration, also changes with his stance. The bow shoots a Hydro arrow that deals massive Hydro damage within a specific radius, and in melee stance, the dual daggers combine into a polearm, which slashes and deals massive Hydro damage as well within a cone in front of Childe. This is the main reason I really wanted Childe. I love characters that are able to change stances. They bring a whole new dynamic to gameplay and usually take a bit of skill to use. Childe is also able to apply status effects on enemies called Riptide, which do different effects depending on which stance that you are in. So whenever you do a charge bow attack, it will leave the Riptide status effect on the enemy and deal Hydro damage. Once you hit the target again in bow stance, it will do a Riptide Flash, which is considered normal attack damage, and deal consecutive AoE damage to the target. This can occur every 0.7 seconds. While in melee stance, if you have the Ascension 2 passive Sword of Torrents unlocked, you are able to apply Riptide with every critical hit you deal on the enemy. Once applied, the next attack will do a Riptide Slash effect in melee stance, which does AoE Hydro damage, and it's considered as elemental skill damage, and this occurs every 1.5 seconds. And lastly, within the bow stance, when you use the Havoc Obliteration, it will also apply the Riptide status on enemies, and in melee stance, if the target has the Riptide status applied, it will cause a Riptide Blast, which deals an elemental burst damage and causes a Hydro explosion. With each death, no matter on how the enemy dies, Riptide spreads to an enemy nearby. At first, this seems extremely complicated and a bit confusing, but once you read it a few times and start using him, it gets a lot easier to understand. But I enjoy that he is a really complex character in this matter. Now I'm going to go over his passive. His main passive, Master of Weaponry, is my favorite passive in the game at the moment. It increases the normal attack level for party members by 1, which greatly increases the damage output for the team. And in addition, to helping you save resources as well, which is really nice. Then comes the Ascension passive 1, Never Ending, which increases the Riptide duration by 8 seconds. This helps greatly with long-term damage output on enemies. Then we have Ascension passive 2, Sword of Torrents, which I explained earlier. Any critical hit and melee stance will apply the Riptide status on enemies, which is insane when building into DPS. With all that said, just because on how his abilities work together, it's the main reason why I'm building Childe as another carry. I do have Diluc, and I don't really need Childe as, another carry, but I feel like he will lose a lot of his potential if I just build him as a support character. The build I have in mind for Childe is roughly 50% or more crit rate, with 100% crit rate damage and over, so anything above 100% would be fine. 150 to 200 elemental mastery, and with as much attack percentage as I could get. These will be the substats on the artifacts I will be looking for in the coming weeks. Unfortunately, this will be extremely hard to come by, and one of the negative things about Childe. He requires an extremely specific build to really unlock his full potential, but once he gets there, I know he'll be one of the most insane DPS, even without constellations. His main stat on the artifacts that I'm looking for is the Circlet, either crit rate or damage. The Goblet, Hydro damage, and Hourglass is attack percentage. The Feather and the Flower don't matter because they never change in main stat. The artifact set I have so far is the 2-piece Gladiators for 18% attack, and the 2-piece Noblesse Oblige for the 20% burst damage. This will be a placeholder until the new Hydro artifact set comes out. The weapon I am using for Childe, and I personally think is amazing, is the Viridescent Hunt. It's the premium battle pass weapon you could get once you reach level 30. If you haven't pulled Rust or Skyward Harp, I think you should go for this weapon. The substacks give crit percent, which alleviates some of the crit rate percent you need on artifact substats or even main stat. The effect also benefits Childe greatly, which is there is a 50% chance of normal or charge attacks creating a cyclone that pulls enemies together and deals 40% of attack, and deals damage every 0.5 seconds for 4 seconds. And occurs every 14 seconds. And with refinements, the 40% attack can raise and the 14-second occurrence can be lowered. This helps greatly with keeping enemies together. Normally, Childe's normal and charge attack launches enemies, but with this effect, it keeps them together so you can output more damage and lose less stamina. In addition, this works well with the Riptide status effects as well. Also, Childe's Raging Time can proc the effect of the bow, and this is why I love the bow so much. The specific team synergy I like to use with Childe is any character that can either leave their elemental skill or burst on the field. So for example, like Fischl dropping Oz, Xiangling leaving Guba or her elemental burst, Barba with a specific constellation, she could use her elemental skill and give Childe a 50% hydro damage bonus. Beidou and her elemental burst as well, you know, it stays around you. So anything of that sort is, I would consider really good team synergy with Childe. But the one downside I have is that if you don't manage his Raging Tide properly, you could be left with a 45-second cooldown, and if the rest of the team isn't built properly for damage, then there would be a downtime for you to wait so you can actually efficiently output more damage. So you have to be really careful with this. But if built correctly, even Childe's bow attack, normal or charged, can deal a lot of damage. I can hit roughly 4k plus critical charge attacks and roughly around 3 to 4k normal attacks if it hits all criticals. And that's with a 39% crit rate on Childe. It would be a way more damage, of course, with a higher crit rate. So you could roughly do 8k plus bow charge attack damage if you do elemental reaction with melt as well. So it would be really good with pyro users, and of course with the proper build. In the open world, Childe seems to thrive and can be very enjoyable. So enemies can be difficult to fight, like Hydro and Ice Abyss mages or Hilichurl champions with the Geo Shield. But for the most part, he cuts them down with ease. Once you get into the Abyss, the higher tiers can be a bit difficult because building a team around Childe isn't easy. He takes a lot of time on the field. It makes it difficult to do proper rotations at times. So long-term damage output could be lower in the Abyss compared to someone like Diluc. He is not bad at all, just makes the Abyss a little bit harder. With enough practice, you can be good with any character. Childe also has the fastest speed at the moment for any character in Raging Tide, which is a plus when building critical rate and damage. Also, in my opinion, he has the best animations for abilities in the game so far. He just feels so good to use because of his speed and the Hydra animations that he creates when using his Raging Tide. Overall, Childe is a monster on the battlefield, and I'm nowhere near his complete build. He is complex and takes a lot of micromanaging of abilities to pull his true potential. And lastly, he just looks so good while doing it all. Just to summarize everything, the pros I really have with Childe, you know, he's able to switch stances. He can output tons of damage. His animations are pristine. They're beautiful. They look nice. He has the best passive at the moment, at least in my mind. And he does really well in the open world. The cons, he can be difficult to micromanage his cooldowns at times. It's kind of hard to finding the right team synergy with him. Building requirements are kind of difficult. He requires really late game builds to really pull off the amount of damage you really want for him. This is just a little bit nitpicky, but for the wording of the abilities, it can be a bit confusing. Just with all the Riptide status effects. And his effectiveness also drops in the higher levels of the Abyss, at least at the moment. This could change in the future. But yeah, overall, that's just really the experience I have with Childe so far, the goods and the bads, and hopefully this insight kind of helps you out if you do have Childe to actually continue to build him, or if maybe if he comes back out in the future, maybe want to get him. But thanks again for watching, guys. I really appreciate it. Remember to leave a like, subscribe, and have a wonderful rest of your day. Thank you.